TRT treatment is something that's widely thought of as something that just gives you an edge. That extra beast mode in the gym, a little bit of push when it's needed, or just that testosterone feeling, right? But in actuality, TRT treatment goes way deeper than that. It helps keep you calm. It helps keep you patient. It regulates your mood by regulating your hormones. It's not just a treatment to go beast mode. It's a treatment to be a calmer and better father. As a business owner and a father myself, I understand all too well how much it's needed to become a little more patient and a little more calm in a world that's pretty chaotic. Go check out Prime Performance today.
This episode of Mental is brought to you by Spas and More. Visit spasandmorestl.com for more information.
Welcome back to, forgot the name of my show. Welcome to Mental. Thank you for joining us. If it's your first time here, thank you for stopping in. If you're returning, thank you for joining us again. Today my guest is Miss Annie Yacht. Annie, for those of the individuals at home that may not know your background or who you are, can you give a brief synopsis of who you are, what you do, and that way we can talk about why you're here.
Sure. So I've been a leadership coach for probably the last 15 years. What sets me apart is when I'm working with entrepreneurs, high-level performers, I focus specifically on changing the neurochemistry and boosting the neurochemistry while at the same time doing the deep trauma work or the deep work on building the business to help scale and grow.
So, building a better version of ourselves inside out.
Correct, yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So, you and I met 4 years ago now?
4 years.
Was that about right? Mm-hmm. On a panel in the middle of the Midwest.
Correct.
Right, in the middle of nowhere.
I remember.
It was a delightful weekend and experience. But I've asked you here today because since we've met, I've gone on a healing journey. There was a couple profound words. I don't know if I've ever actually shared this part of it, but what set this off was a need to heal. But the affirmation that keeps me going within my brain is the sentence that I hope you heal and go on to do great things.
Okay.
So this is kind of like a thing that replays in my brain.
Okay. Well, healing journeys are the best.
They're cool.
We're on them for our entire lives, so
Right.
might as well enjoy it.
Well, and one of the things I didn't realize when starting this is like probably November of last year, I got into a point where I felt satisfied or as if I had completed something.
Okay.
And then I added, the analogy I used when we were talking about this the other day is I added a ball. Mm-hmm. You know, I got to work, fatherhood, and emotional awareness, not emotional mastery by any means, but emotional awareness. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was pretty cool. I was in a good place. Yeah. And I stopped doing some work for a bit. And then I added a fourth ball and realized that preparedness for a battle is different than preparedness for the war. Or in other words, winning the NBA Finals doesn't mean I don't have to prepare for next season.
Right.
There's going to be new challenges. So I've since taken on the mindset that, and this is leading to a question, taken on the mindset that life's journey is a lot like being in a canoe on a river. I don't know if you've heard me say this yet, but I look at it as I have to do the work every day. I have to paddle my boat, and I can go over to the left, I can go to the right, I can stay in the center, but I can't control the current of the river.
Very accurate.
I can't, I can worry about what's around the next bend, but it doesn't behoove me to do so. Whatever is around the next bend
Is around the next bend.
is around the next bend and doesn't here. And the end of the river is something that I always used to, where's the end of the river? What I've realized is the end of the river is eternity. It's the next part of my life. It's the part where my physical being is done and I move into there. There is no, we never stop on this journey. And letting go has been my biggest continuous challenge, whether it be one aspect or another. So when you're dealing with entrepreneurs, I'm sure I'm not the only entrepreneur that falls into the ADD
You are not.
category.
No, you are not.
Right? Or someone who has had most of his life with a protection of ego, right? To hide all the insecurities. What are some of the things you do to start breaking those things down and identifying those in individuals that you work with?
Well, I think everybody gets to start at the same point, right? Because it's true what you're saying. The ego, the personality, the ADD, almost every entrepreneur has some of these things because the trauma patterns of being a 7-year-old little kiddo that goes through really tough stuff, usually it's from 7 to 10, can direct and cause more of that to be prevalent, which is interesting. But what I do with everybody is the first session is always the same. We're always looking at what are the lowest points in your life, what are the highest points in your life, and what are the patterns that are linked between those two things. Because the patterns between the low point and the high point dictate the trauma pattern that your brain is going to put you in cycle after cycle after cycle. The context will change of that pattern, but the actual cycle remains the same. And so it's my job with the person to identify what is this pattern, the cycle that you've been stuck in that affects you in your relationships and in your business life. Most people think it's just a business life cycle, but it really isn't. There are always patterns in your relationship cycle history that affect dramatically how you run your business. So that's the first session that I do with almost everybody. And in that session, most men and women will be like, oh my God, I've never noticed that I do this. I've never seen that I do this. Or that makes perfect sense because I do that all the time, just without really knowing that I'm putting myself down that pattern.
Yeah.
So that's how we start.
So you say relationships. One of the things that I've noticed about what I thought was at some point that my most of the work that I had to do was within relationships, romantic relationships. The realization that there was so much outside of that relationship that goes into how I show up in that relationship was new for me. But it's not strange, but it's interesting that you start there with businesses too, because relationships are the one place where I feel as if you're confronted with something that you might not necessarily navigate. You can't get out of it. You're in a tight quartered space. You're with the same person every single day. It's a unique thing, right? Because as parents, we have these little relationships.
Correct.
These little people that we're in
Correct.
relationships with. They're not little relationships by any means. That we can't get rid of, right?
Very
You can't
true.
just. I think everyone as a parent has had a moment where like, I want to break up with you.
I don't like you very much right now.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's not really an option as a parent.
It is not.
It has definitely forced me to learn patience and many other traits and attributes that I probably wouldn't have learned. But it wasn't until very recently in my life that I started looking at other relationships in the same way. How can I face these relationships without maybe even acknowledgement that there is an out, right? Like, what if I never get out of this relationship? How would I make it work? How would I adjust accordingly? And in that same sense, that's where business is. Because now as this transpires and develops my company here, there's days where I want to throw in the towel. There's days where I want to argue back and forth with my partners here and employees and things like that. But I know that I can't just shut down and leave it all behind because it's my livelihood. This is what I want to do, right? How do those things coincide, and where do you start finding those connections besides the patterns? And are there multiple patterns? Because when you say patterns to me, that's
There's usually
plural.
like one core pattern that's the biggest one
Okay.
that shows up all the time. And then there are smaller sub-patterns off of those patterns. So, for example, right, you might have somebody in their relationship who has, because their parents got divorced, they might feel like, well, I'm only safe if I'm alone because if I'm with someone, they're going to leave me, right? So that then starts to play out in business where, sure, they'll partner with people, but they always end up getting themselves out of those partnerships because ultimately they need to be alone because that's where they feel safe because of the parents' divorce. So I say this because usually if you know what somebody went through between 7 and age 10, you can identify, okay, well then you're definitely doing this in business, right? And they'll be like, oh my God, I do that all the time. I'm like, is that serving the growth of the business? No, it's not. So if you are programmed by your subconscious to be alone and to only know that being alone is safe, then you will thwart or cause issue with almost every affiliate partnership, team building, team growth, you will do something to make yourself alone again. And so that's why when I look at these patterns, I like looking not necessarily at a business pattern. When we do that first session, it's always, what is the lowest point of your life? What is the highest point of your life? And what is the core connection between the two? So I just did this the other day.
When you say core connection.
Yes. So core connection is, and I didn't realize until recently that I see this.
I didn't realize either that this was the physical way of saying core connection. Explain more. But just doing this in that. Core connection.
Right. Core, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize that my brain sees this in people really, really quickly.
Okay.
And so I'll basically look at, okay, here are the immediate changes that happen to you when you're in this low point, but here are the lasting effects that are still with you today that are still coming up. And then usually from looking at the low points, I can tell you, okay, so this is part of this negative cycle that you get stuck into. Then when you look at the high points, you start to see, oh my God, this is exactly what they need for success in every area of their life. But for most of us, when we get in that negative pattern, we can't even contemplate the things that make us successful. Mm-hmm. We're literally so deep in the trauma pattern and we're so deep in isolation or disconnection from people around us that we don't know exactly what to do to get ourselves out. So we spend a lot of time, and we waste a lot of time in business trying to get ourselves out of these patterns, and we're wasting hours and sometimes even months or weeks of our time. So what I'm able to do when I look at the low point and the high point is I'll be able to identify from the highest point, here's exactly what you need to do to get yourself out of the low point over and over and over again much faster, because your traumas aren't going to go away.
Right.
Right? The traumas are still going to be there, but it's your job as the person managing yourself to look at those trauma patterns and say, okay, this used to put me into a trauma loop for weeks. This used to put me into a trauma loop for days. I'm going to get it all the way down so it's maybe 10 minutes of me being stuck in something until I can get myself out. Mm-hmm. And that's a really hard thing to do when your neurochemistry is deficient or depleted because you don't have enough serotonin or oxytocin to be able to boost yourself up naturally. So it's a lot of reps down that same neural pathway to move yourself. Which for a lot of people, it's really hard to do the reps because if you're not big into like working out and you've sort of conditioned in your body, like it's all about the reps, all about the reps. You just got to get the practice in. That still takes time to do, right? And if you're being triggered consistently on all these different points, it's hard to get a lot of reps in on one technique. So that's why I like to boost the neurochemistry while at the same time doing the intentional, emotional, and intellectual work.
Yeah, that's very identifiable, right? There's a lot of aspects in my life where, let's take motivation,
Sure.
which I've come to realize is kind of a made up word, in that I used to literally pray for patience or pray for motivation.
Okay.
I would wait for God to wake me up one morning and I'm
Now I'm motivated.
ready to do everything.
Right.
Let's take on the world. And forget that patterns that I've created in the past would put me in a place where working out made me realize how good it feels. It would become a habit that would become then what I considered a good addiction.
Yes.
Because it very much was part of just what you do, right? Your habits become who you are. So there's parts of the journey that I've been on lately where what I used to not do, because there was patterns that were repetitious. Depression was one of those patterns. I would get down on myself. I would self-sabotage, and then I would stay sunken. Yeah. Now, what was crazy is that during those times, I knew that my ticket out of that was activity, action. Start taking control of the things you know you can control. If you feel helpless, I know that I can read the Bible. I know I can write in my journal. I know I can go work out. I know I can do these things, and I can control those things. I have mastery over those things in the sense that I am the master of myself. Not mastery as in I'm an expert.
Right.
But there's something neurologically that blocks me. 'Cause I'd be laying literally on my couch and be like, oh, why do I feel like this? I'm like, to
You're like,
myself.
just get up. You can do this. Get up.
Why don't you just do some
right?
push-ups?
Yeah.
I don't know, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is wacky to think about, but
Sometimes we don't have the
increasingly-
neurochemistry to get ourselves there.
Right. And so some of the things that would evoke a great emotional response in me, when you start talking about dwindling those patterns down, but they never go away, I just had an experience this morning where what would have shut me down for 3 days minimum
Right.
took me 10 minutes to talk through, process, and
Amazing.
whatever.
Amazing.
Amazing. Great. I still have a lot of things that I can't do that with.
Right.
And so the learning experience of finding those gaps is intriguing to me.
Yes.
Because I know who I am at my core.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've all, as humans, we see that brightest point, like you say, your highest point.
Yeah.
And we all want to strive to be that because we know that's who we are. That's who we were put on this earth to be. And then there's that block.
Yes.
So when you're taking down those walls, when you're undoing those blocks, you're talking about doing it from a neurological standpoint, a point of discovery first, and then helping cope with that.
So a point of discovery, we have to be in awareness of what's going on first.
Okay.
After that, typically you want to look for, is this a mindset issue? Is this a consciousness issue? Is this a subconscious issue? Is it an ambition issue? Is it a purpose issue? So I'm running people through the concept of, okay, we've got this root trauma pattern that applies in all these different ways, but what is really the root of why this is happening? Is it all of these things happening at once? Is it one or two of these things happening at once?
Are these 5 pillars that are always in place, or is there variables?
Almost always in place. You
Okay.
need to work on the mindset, the consciousness, the subconscious, the ambition, and the purpose.
Okay.
And so what I realized, though, is you're working on all these things, but the individual needs to be thinking about, okay, where is this stuck in my body? How do I get this out of my body, right? So I started with those 5 things that I was always working to shift and identify, how's this applying for the person? And what I realized was the problem that I saw with a lot of coaching is you need something really quickly to get the person out of their old space, like that old emotional state. So like, say you came in...
Jolt before the activities?
Well, it's more like the emotion of it is stuck in your body. So when you have this like big emotional charge around something, you know what that feels like. All of us do.
Sure.
It's really hard to clear that out of our own body, even though we know that any emotion only lasts allegedly for 90 seconds. Because in our minds, we attach that emotion to something that happened in the past, and then it compiles the meaning of this experience, and it triggers us, and then we're down that rabbit hole of the old trauma pattern.
Right.
So I look at
Joy
those...
can only happen in the moment.
Correct.
Anything else is a memory, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Or gratitude.
Okay.
Right? So you've got these 5 areas that you're always looking at, but for me, I was like, why does it take people so much time to do the reps? Because if I could fast track how quickly people do the reps, then we've got to win. And so that's when I started doing a lot of research. Also, I had at the time, a Navy SEAL ex-husband, or about to be ex-husband, who was going through a lot of really intense stuff in his life and his mental health journey. And I was getting down to the wire to be like, I don't know what else I can do to help this man. And 15 years of every counselor, every instructor, every training, every even a psychedelic experience. What can we do to move him forward? And that was when I had to sit down with myself and be like, it's actually not just him. I've got a lot of stuff that I got to work on too. Because we were, when you meet someone and you date them, it's almost always some sort of a trauma bond that pulls you together because you're both working on different things, and this person's now a healing partner for you. And so when that was going on, I found a company that calmed the nervous system. And after 15 years of trying every single thing and only seeing minor little adjustments, because the intellectual piece of this, the consistency of making these mental shifts and reframing, and I mean, it's exhausting sometimes, right? Because you're still in the loop. You're just trying to reframe the loop. And so for me, I was like, there's got to be a better way. When I found this other company, what they do is they calm the nervous system so well that your brain, instead of going down the hyper neural pathway, which is the highway of all your past thoughts, all of a sudden you get boosted a little bit energetically through your nervous system, through the neurochemistry, and suddenly you can take this side little road off that huge neural pathway, and you can start to make new changes, and the reps are easier. So I was like, my God, if more people could boost their nervous system and their neurochemistry so that this repetition is easier, this is like a game changer for entrepreneurs. So I, obviously, because I'm that type of person, I went out and I tested all this stuff, and I did it all with my ex-husband. And it was crazy to watch how we would come back from this experience. People would be like, what did you do to him? He's more connected. He's more real. He's more authentic. He's saying things he never would have said before. He's not in pain anymore. And I was like, well, there must be something to this neurochemical boost. So I think the thing that makes me sad about trauma patterns is, for most of us that don't know about how important it is to boost the neurochemistry at the same time as doing all the reps, as coaches, we do the reps, we help people, we get them to see new things, we give them new awareness, but we can't make someone change unless they're actively committed to the process.
It's a lot like addiction in general, right?
Yep. Yep.
And what's strange right now is like as you're explaining neurological things for the first time, I'm listening. I'm hearing the conversation that's taking place like 2 rooms over. Can anyone else hear that?
No.
You hear it. Producer hears it.
Okay.
Sam
I mean, I can
got
hear
it.
a little hum.
Yeah, it's a change in pressure. Like noises for me are like pressure. I apologize, but I smiled when you first said that. Like, if I could find a way to make these reps more rapid, it reminded me of something about Mary when that dude's in the car and he's like, "It's not 8-minute abs; it's 7-minute abs." It's like 6 minutes isn't long enough, but 8 minutes is too long. It's 7 minutes. It's got to be
it's so
7-minute
funny.
abs because you're talking about increasing the reps and finding
Increasing
these.
the ease of the reps. Well,
Yeah, find these neurological pathways. And the other thing that you touched on there that has been I wouldn't say a point of contention for me in the past, but certainly something that I've come to believe is not as useful as people want to believe, and that's couples or marriage counseling. My belief at this time in my life, one thing I try and really strive for is understanding that I stand on my principles, I stand on my beliefs now, but I'm open to understanding a new way to think,
Okay.
right? So at this point in my life, I believe that when you're in a relationship, the communication between you two isn't solved by couples therapy. It's solved by you go work on you, I go work on me, because the problems are usually a mirror. So when you talk about you're bringing him back in and people are saying, what did you do to him? It's so authentic, so this and that. One of the things that I found during my, what I'll call my patterns of addiction, because as I explained in my last show, I consider myself an alcoholic still. I don't have a problem with alcohol at this point in my life, but in my early 20s I did.
Okay.
And so much in that same way, I try and look at people's traumas in an understanding way. The discussion I had on a previous show was that I had formally given advice to someone and said, hey, maybe at some point you want to expand upon your scope of brand from just being a widow, without the understanding, realization, or what she's going through, and that comprehension of, regardless of even if you remarry, you're always going to be a widow. Regardless if I don't have an alcohol problem now, I'm always an alcoholic because I had the tendencies and I had that in there.
But why do we have to hold the old version of ourselves?
So what I bring that up for is because with that understanding, I've used it as fuel to know that there is the place I don't want to be ever again. And so like nowadays, if I have a drink or a cocktail, and I have these triggers where I notice.
Of course, you go down the old pathway.
Right? Or I'll say like, the two primary ones are, what are we doing next? When I start thinking about what are we doing next, that, for me, what am I doing next? Having a glass of water and heading home. Because that means I'm getting too comfortable with that feeling.
Okay.
For me, to live in that feeling. And so in that same way, when you talk about couples or marriage counseling, what I've come to understand is when I'm having conflict in a relationship of any kind, rather than saying, I need a mediator to talk through how we can better communicate, I try and now look at that situation and say, what can I do differently here to get a different outcome from this conversation? What am I bringing to this relationship or bringing to this moment even that I can change within myself that doesn't compromise who I am?
No, it's perfect. That's what we all should be thinking. What do I need to bring to this moment to
But
change?
how am I evoking this emotion from this other person versus why am I being defensive? Why are you evoking this emotion from me?
Right.
Right? So when you're talking about going through these modalities and he's come back and people are telling you, what did you do to him? It's really about you helping unlock what he's done for himself.
Correct. 100%. Because I'm not in charge of I'm not responsible for anyone's success or their change. It's literally you just allow the person to have a safe space to unlock the thing that they haven't been able to see about themselves, and that's why I like the microbiotic, intelligence of the body, because the microbiotic intelligence, as you increase the strength of that bacteria that runs your body, you become so much more aware, because it's almost like you're turning on parts of your body that you've never had access to. Like your smell gets more intense. You can pick up more in your subconscious that's positive. But I think you're dead on. That's why a lot of the couples that work with me will say, like, gosh, this is so much better than therapy. We did something that should have taken us like an hour in therapy, but we spent 15 years paying a therapist. Therapy can be great, but I think there has to be an action plan. There has to be, we talk about something, we create an action plan to change the behavior, Let's go and experience what it's like to practice this, and let's come back and tweak it and make it better for everybody.
Okay.
So that's what I'm sort of a big fan of. Like, we can't just be mirrors, but I do agree, each person has to do their own work before you can really do a lot of work with each other, because a lot of the work that you do when you're in that triggered state with each other just doesn't get you anywhere. We had that experience for 10 years, so I know how hard that is.
Uneducated theory, if you want it, is that therapy is about psychology, right? Yet, if you're addressing two people, it's not a shared mind. So in that terminology, really, now we're into sociology. Yet, that's not how the therapy is presented or practiced. And so the thing that I think is hard for me to wrap my head around is, how are you addressing two unique minds, unique traumas, unique experiences, and trying to connect those two when you're not addressing the underlying issue, that there's an issue here and an issue here.
That's been my whole issue with therapy, because I'm like, listen, if I'm going to work with a couple, I have to do trauma work with one person in the couple, trauma work with the other person in the couple, then I can bring them back together and say, here's the trauma cycle that we identified for both of you. Are you both aware of this? And usually they're just like, oh my God, no, we didn't even know we were doing this. And it's like, okay, and now here's the trauma bond cycle that you guys get caught in. Are you aware of this? And most couples are like, nope, I had no idea that was going on. I'm like, well, when you're in this type of individual trauma, then you're in a trauma bond as a couple, now we can start to see why there are the communication issues that we have. And then it's about like teaching new ways to communicate based on the customized approach of looking at the trauma patterns that each individual has and the couple has as an entity separately.
So almost like an Al-Anon, when I refer to alcoholic, it's like, if I don't understand your traumas,
Right.
I'm not going to understand how to meet you or present you in a safe space. One of the things that I've historically done in relationships is, as a defense mechanism, I don't ask questions or ask follow-up questions. And I'm not very, have not been, I should say, receptive to what their traumas are, where that things. And it used to be one of those situations where I would look at that as, that's how I am, like, deal with it or not. And instead of being like, I want to create a safe space. Because, you know, that old adage about, like, you can't love someone until you love yourself. Well, like, I would want someone to create a safe space for me. That's all I've longed for in a relationship. So why would I not want to put effort forth and create that, rather than test someone's ability to love by self-sabotaging?
Right.
Creating a worse version of myself on a daily basis rather than a better version, and then expecting them to show up and save me somehow. Like, it was a very reverse, backwards way of thinking. I think you talked about it being a way of consistently being in flight mode, right?
Fight or flight. Yep.
Yeah. Well, in this
Almost
instance, I say flight specifically because
Right.
there was, you said fight earlier about it, but I always looked at it as like, I'm going to see how far I can push them away before they push me away. Instead of being like, you know what, let's become better versions of ourselves every day and see how deeply we can create a bond.
Well, I think that's why I got more into this concept of Tantra. I started learning Tantra about 2 years ago because the concept of Tantra is truth and growth over everything. And so they have there's this concept of a healing partnership where you go into partnership with someone and you can say, I'm committed to my truth and my growth. I'm committed to you being in truth and growing. And in our relationship, I'm connected to truth and growth as well. And so what I love about that is that you can have very hard conversations with people and you cannot fully love, like, know yourself and love yourself at a deep level.
Yeah.
And you can still be in relationship with the person, learning how to love. Because for me, the hardest thing was, I was in a relationship.
Simultaneously? Like yourself and this individual?
Yes. Because, when people say to you, well, you can't love anybody until you love yourself, great, check, but I'm not going to not be in a relationship for the rest of my life as I learn to love myself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be in a healing partnership with somebody and set some great agreements together on how are we going to communicate, how are we going to interact, what's intimacy to us, how do we define intimacy, what's truth for us, what do we do when we want to have a difficult conversation. So we have a lot of those conversations up front, and then we sort of play out and interact around intimacy and connection, and we learn what works for each of us without the pressure of this being like an actual relationship that is heading towards an outcome of marriage. So, because I think that when you head towards the outcome of marriage, sometimes we're socially conditioned to believe a certain way or think we have to act a certain way, and it really causes a lot of our traumas or trigger patterns to come back up. Because, if you're in truth and growth and you're in a healing partnership where you're both there for each other, you're not necessarily trying to sabotage your way out of it. You're trying to learn as much as you can about yourself and the other person, how to manage those conflicts that come up.
That's an interesting thought about working towards marriage as a goal in a relationship, because that's almost become, because of society,
Correct.
a subconscious linear
Progression.
right? And so whether we know it or not, in our brains,
Yep.
we have this timeline.
Correct. And the timeline puts a lot of pressure on the present moment.
Because it, undoubtedly, most of us, and we're probably all, a lot of similar ones, but I'm sure each has unique too, with a timeline and a deadline, typically there's a structure and unspoken rules that we've given ourselves.
Correct.
So we're really setting ourselves up to let ourselves down in ways that we
100%.
may not even know yet,
100%.
right?
That's why when I look at relationships, what I say and I commit to is and it's funny because my subconscious really freaked out on me at one point because I'm like, well, I'm never going to get married again. Like, this is never going to happen. Then I was like, wait a second. Am I totally enjoying the loving connection I'm experiencing in this moment? I am. Do I want to keep making the choice every day to be in a loving connection with this person? Yes, I do. So why can't I just keep making the choice to be in loving connection and just enjoy it?
Yeah. Yeah. I was in a relationship once that was pretty cool about that. I remember one of the things I learned there was quality over quantity. There was no expectation on the other end of an end goal.
Right.
There was only the expectation of enjoying the present.
But that's why we have to have that same concept in everything intimacy related.
Yeah.
There's no end goal. We're not searching or reaching for the orgasm. We're searching for enjoying every single moment as if it is an orgasm. Like the same, and I use this concept because people can understand it, right? Most times when people have sex, it's like, gotta get to the orgasm, gotta get to the end goal. Yeah. But it's about being in pleasure the entire time and enjoying that experience.
Okay.
And that's what I like to think of about relationships. If we can just shift this paradigm a little bit in our minds and be like, am I having fun in this moment with this person? I am. This is great. Okay. Do I want to have fun in the next moment with this person? Yes, I do. Am I committed to choosing this person in this moment? I am. And so if we could be a little bit more present with that instead of thinking about the end goal of what this relationship will look like or where we're going in the relationship or what we want to create in the relationship, it takes a lot of pressure off of us. Mm-hmm. Now, it's important to have a conversation about if you're exclusive or not exclusive, right? Because that's an important safety mechanism.
Especially nowadays.
For a container, right?
There's a lot of different options
Control,
that were
that's right.
in play in the 90s.
That is very true.
Well, and that's incredibly applicable to business as well. I've often said, even before I began this portion of my life, let's call it this chapter of my life, I've often said that relationships, when I talk about business partnerships, I look at them like marriages. Mm-hmm. Because you're in that, it's a relationship. There's a give and take. Mm-hmm. There has to be an understanding. There has to be room for growth. There has to be grace given to the other individuals within your workspace to catch up or understand things. I had a really narrow mindset about intelligence overall at one point. When I was a young lad, I had a corporate job.
Okay.
And my supervisor was, as the kids say, an idiot. And just in general.
The technical term.
He just, common sense eluded him. There was a lot of times where he would misspeak or things were just like, whatever. But what I didn't appreciate at that time, and so I took that and I used that information and that knowledge of his just inability to read a room or have a conversation as a total ignorance. And what I should have done is understood that that individual had 10 more years at that company than I would ever have. Because even if I went 10 years, he's at 20, right?
Right.
And I didn't soak up the knowledge that he had for that career path. Instead, I resented him for being in charge of me with what I felt was less intelligence. And that was also an unfair moniker, because what do I really know his intelligence level? Because he says some things wrong. He could be the most brilliant person that walked the earth. But I had all these judgments because I had all these things that, as a mirror, I'm really just looking at it as why does he have that and I don't? It was really all ego.
Yeah.
But later on, I wrote that gentleman an email, like years after I left that company, probably 3 or 4 years. And I just said, hey, I want to apologize for my lack of respect towards you and in front of others, because I have come to appreciate the time and effort you put into that job and the knowledge you built there. And I apologize that I didn't take that into consideration.
Well, we miss a lot of wisdom from people when we're in a triggered state.
We miss all of the wisdom. And it's weird because hindsight's 20/20, like these things are made to build, but in the same way that I've learned that from job experiences or past companies that I've been involved with, I've just recently started learning that in relationships since. Whether it's romantic or friendships, is like looking at the things for what the positive I can take away rather than the negative.
Well, I find that most times when you're in a relationship with anybody, whether it's business or otherwise, and something triggers you, it's almost always an indicator of something you have to work on in yourself, right? And so, like, if I'm upset about someone's arrogance, that's because I have arrogance issues in myself that I've never addressed, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, it comes off as quite silly when you're not concerned about it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But that's how, like, if anyone's listening and you want to figure out, well, what are my massive triggers? Well, just watch who around you bothers you. And then look at that and be like, wow, that personality has something to do with something in me that's unhealed. Because I used to have a real big issue with people that I thought were arrogant. And I was like, well, I'm not arrogant. What's going on here, right? But then I reflected on it for a bit. I'm like, actually, this reminds me of the younger version of myself that was super arrogant, thought she knew everything. Because, you know, we're all in our 20s and we have those moments where we're like, oh, I know how to do this.
I may or may not have been a very prideful young man.
Well, yeah, well, we all have to go through that. But it's just funny now.
Mine was just a protective suit of armor.
Of course.
Though,
Well,
right?
we all have a protective suit of armor.
Yeah.
Everybody's protective suit is just different, but it causes the same result. The same result is we isolate ourselves,
Yep.
we disconnect from ourselves, and we disconnect from higher power.
What part of it makes everything? Because this is something I still struggle with. I would say I almost said that I have issues with, but in actuality, I still struggle with this. What part of it is the part that has me? Let's just call it what it is. That I struggle with is that even when it's not, I make things about me. Your issues that you come to me with, if you have something that you want to deal with or about the way we operate together as a team or as a relationship or whatever, I have historically found a way to make it about me. Now I've gotten better to ask questions. Why do you feel that way?
Be curious.
Be curious. Not try and fix.
Right.
Not
Just
everything
sit
needs
in
me
it
to
and
fix.
validate it, right?
Where does that typically come from? Where it's, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I've had this experience. When I first went down to Tampa, and I remember being in these dorms, and I was really quiet and timid because, which I'm never, but I was in a new state with nobody I knew. And how I'd gotten there was strange. Like the whole thing was odd.
Okay.
So I was, maybe for the only time that I can recall in that age range up to like 30, was observant rather than projecting,
Okay.
making myself being known. Like, I'm here, look at me, pay attention to me. And there was this guy who I immediately clicked with. And I thought he was a really cool guy. I thought everybody thought he was a cool guy. And about 3 days into being there, the other two roommates were like, hey, how do you know so-and-so? And I was like, I don't. I actually just met him 3 days ago. And they're like, oh, cool. What do you think of him? And I'm like, I don't know. You know, I'm just waiting to hear what they say. They're like, because we can't stand that dude. And we think he's a douchebag. And we want him to get out and for you to move in potentially. And I was like, And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, holy cow. I clicked with this dude because he is me. And these people can't stand these personality traits that I inhabited but have not released yet because I'm new in this space. And I really started looking introspectively for the first time about
That's huge.
was like that. And so now what you're saying is like, you know, how can we do that with all things? Is the observe portion. So one of my biggest things that I've worked on, which isn't apparent during this time because I'm excited to share, is talk less, listen more, ask questions, and get to know individuals. Right? How important is it for anyone to get to know their coworkers, their partners, their romantic partners?
It's the most important thing that you can do because everyone has a deep wounding around not being seen, right? Or not being heard.
Okay.
And so, you know, I used to be, I think, very robotic as a young person. I'm going to be productive. I'm going to get my stuff done. And I will never forget a woman took me aside I was working at a white-collar crime law firm. And she took me aside and she's like, Annie, you're so good at getting all these things done. But she's like, and you're very kind. She's like, I can tell you're kind. But she's like, you are racing through each moment. and almost ordering people around to get what you need done. She's like, you would actually do much better if you connected with each person and you had a moment with each person. I'm like, well, that's going to waste a ton of time. Like at my little 22-year-old self, right? Well, that's going to waste a ton of time. I won't be able to get as much done. And she's like, but they will do more for you. And you will be a better team with each other. And that was so dramatically life-changing for me that I started asking so many more questions, being so curious about people and why they live the way they do and why they act the way they do. And, oh, I saw you do that. Is that because of this? You know, I just started asking so many questions. And I feel like if all of us as human beings, for the people that we love and we care about, we can ask like that deeper why question, we will be able to better motivate everybody around us. We'll be able to build them up as leaders better. So you can't just say it once, like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you into this? You have to go 4 or 5 levels deep on that why, and then eventually the person will feel like, maybe I'm safe enough to share. And then once you learn that about them, then everything that you do to lift them up goes back to their why. So I wish more companies, like when I go into a lot of companies to work with the companies on team leadership, I'll go and I'm like, do you know what is most important to this lead manager who works in your real estate company? And the lead manager is the person that sets all the phone appointments. And the CEO or the executive team will be like, I have no idea. I'm like, well, how are you supposed to motivate someone if they're not money motivated, if we don't even know what her most important thing is? And so when we had our team of 14 coaches, I knew every single big dream and big why of every person on our team. And if their behavior was off, I'm like, hey, are we still going after this big why together that's linked to the vision of the company? Because if we're not, that's okay. I just need to know. And people would redirect themselves right back in. It's like, nope, I know in order to get to that big why, I've got to be playing this role in a certain way and creating impact in this certain way. So the biggest thing I would tell anyone who's listening that owns a company, make sure you know the why, the deep-seated emotional why of every single person on your team, because that will help you motivate them, inspire them. And it's not your job to motivate or to inspire, but it is your job to have conversations around what do you think you would need, knowing you have this big dream to feel motivated every day and to help walk people through that. Because I think you're dead on. We don't spend enough time connecting with people and hearing their stories. Thankfully you do in what you guys do at the podcasting studio, right? That's, I think, the most beautiful thing. And I think you're totally in your sweet spot here because you have a chance to not only share your story, but also to get everybody else to share their story, which is healing a part of that, you know, part of that experience you've had.
Well, in that same tune, the sentence that supervisor, was it?
Supervisor, yeah.
The
Well,
woman?
she was one of the attorneys.
Yeah. Said to you, flip this switch.
100%.
Up until that switch flipped, what caused you to be a hyper-efficient human that was not very human-like?
I'll tell you for a fact, when I was a little kid, my mom had 3 kids and a dog under the age of 5. And when my sisters would have homework or anything that had to be done, my mom would say to me,
You're the eldest?
I'm the oldest. Yep. She would say to me, well, you can go play once everybody has their homework done. So I'm like, oh, well, let's get everybody's homework done. So I'd help my sisters get all their homework done, or I'd help my mom set the table, or I'd do whatever I could, because eventually I could go play.
Okay.
But by the time it was time to go play, it was time for dinner. And after dinner, it was time to go to bed. And so every day I would do all these things with the possibility of maybe getting to play, but I never got to play. So I was in that cycle. That was my trauma pattern from the time I was really little. And my mom, obviously, she's a great mom, right? She had no idea she was creating this trauma pattern inside of my body with me. Like, we were doing it together, right? But I asked her to do that. I asked her to create this so I could figure out my way out of it. And then, you know, I get into college and I'm helping everybody around me with their homework and with their, you know, their papers and things like that. Just I'm like, well, everyone will do better and we'll finally get to play.
We can all go play.
We can all go play, right? And then I
Can
realized,
you go to the bar tonight? I have an essay due. Can I help you write it?
yeah, let's get it done. Let's do it, right?
Yeah.
Let's solve the problem. Let's get it done. And then I realized when I got out of college, I'm like, I don't think I had that much fun in college. And everyone says college is like the most fun time. And then I built 3 businesses, and you know, it's helping everybody, manage everybody, making sure everything's moving forward. Everybody else has amazing lives, right? Or clients, they have amazing lives. And I realized all of a sudden, I think it was about probably 7 years ago, I was like, this is not sustainable. I can't keep trying to save everyone when I haven't even saved myself. I can't keep self-sacrificing for everybody else when self-sacrificing is not the way. And I think that once you see what your biggest gap is, you can finally start to remedy it. And it was only because I went through as much as I did that I'm like, none of this is about anybody else. So we're all selfish in a certain regard because we're living that life and that's our reality. We're creating the reality, right? Like, I chose you in my reality because I wanted this interaction to push me further along in some way. Everyone's a gift. Literally every single person you engage with is a gift.
Oh, yeah.
And they're teaching you something essential that moves you forward. If you look at it that way, there are no mistakes.
No. And I've found, up until this point in my life, at least, I would say my most profound and beautiful lessons have come from my biggest pains.
Deepest wounding causes the biggest lessons, which allows you to step into your greatest purpose.
I think of it too, like in my brain just now, like almost like an imagery of like, how could I really get in there and massage and fix and work on my soul if I'm not cracked all the way open? And so to be completely broken down is really the only way to rebuild, because let's say that, I like physical analogies, it helps me think of things. So like, let's say that I've spent 30 years with my arms where my legs should be and my legs where my arms should be, right?
Yep.
And I knew that, hey, this isn't right. These shoes don't fit my hands, and these gloves don't fit my feet. But I didn't know how to correct it. And so until I was ripped apart, limb from limb, metaphorically and emotionally, I couldn't rebuild the way I needed to be to function at my most efficient.
True.
And even then, as I've rebuilt, I've still got some toes on my hands and some fingers on my toes, or my feet, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't look forward to pain.
No.
But
Nobody does.
I no longer am afraid of it the same way. And so even though I have fears about connection and relationship still in my life, I'm getting closer to that point where I can leave it all on the court.
Well, I like what you said about, having to be torn limb from limb, because really it goes back in my mind to that conversation we were having about heartbreak. Right? Like my biggest fear was always like, oh, my heart's going to be broken. Like I'm not going to be able to have the relationship that I want. And all I've wanted my whole life was to be in like a loving relationship with someone.
Yeah.
And what I realized was I kept creating in my subconscious heartbreak with anybody I would date, because that was my biggest fear, that there would be heartbreak. And the moment when I adjusted it, I was just like, God, I sort of love heartbreak. I love the fact that I went through this heartbreak, because I learned that my heart is amazingly flexible. Like you can go through massive heartbreak, but the heart muscle comes back.
Yeah.
And it can be inspired so quickly. And so like for anyone out there that's going through trauma, it's really important to remember like your heart muscle is going to come back.
Sure.
It can be much quicker than you think.
And we take for granted, all of us take for granted, how good it feels not to be sick until we're sick and healed. Right? So I think that's been a profound thing for me, is I took a lot of things for granted in my life. Interactions with other people.
We all do.
Right? Until those were gone. And the first few times in my life that those were ripped away, I still didn't have that lesson of like, maybe I could have cherished that a little bit, or maybe I could have treated that a little different. There was no regret of loss. There was regret of how I felt. Again, it was about me.
Right.
Versus regret of what I was unable to do for that other person that caused that other person to walk out of my life. Whereas now I kind of look at things as the beautiful part about what I took away from my last interaction in a romantic sense was maybe this wasn't about me. You say there's a lesson in everything.
Yeah.
Maybe in this last relationship, maybe I was the conduit. Maybe I was the part that came in and out of that individual's life.
The catalyst.
That they prayed for. And so maybe it had nothing to do with me. That entire relationship could have been solely for that person to learn a lesson for the second, third, or fourth time that they still may not learn after me. But I've certainly had people put in my life to learn the same lesson over and over again.
Yep.
And I have a firm belief that those individuals were there to teach me not to be with me long term, whether it's company or otherwise. And so I think that the beauty that I've found within relationships in general is the understanding that just like with emotions or any relationships, it's not always about me.
Oh, it's not. I mean, I know this isn't a popular opinion, but one of the things that I've thought about, because I think about, why do we choose this? Why do we come in and make this our reality quite a bit? And what I love about the story, I read this book once called The Little Soul in the Sun. And in this book, this little soul is up in heaven, and he's like, I really want to go down. I had this amazing experience where I learned about distinction and emotion and all the pain and all the things. And he like rounds up this bunch of little souls with him, and he's like, I need you to teach me this lesson and make it really powerful. I need you to teach me this lesson, make it really intense. And so I think like my version of how it works is we're all up in this beautiful zone where we have no distinction, everything is oneness, and we're like, let's go do this earth experience and see what it can be like. And then we ask people, we hire people, other little souls to be like, I need you to teach me this lesson. And I fully trust you to teach me this lesson the best way possible, and I know you're doing it from a place of unconditional love. And so for me, when I look at all the people that have quote unquote hurt me or wronged me or caused, pain or suffering in my life, I've done a lot of work to go back to each person and be like, you did this because you loved me so much that you wanted me to have the most beautiful gift of development. And even back to like people that I dated that I was like, wow, like originally, how could this person do this? How could this person treat me like this? I've gone back now and I've done so much work on these different people that I'm like, this person did it out of love for me and because they're still working on their journey. And so everybody in your life, I believe, we have asked, our souls have asked them to give us a lesson. And it is up to us to figure out how to create unconditional love and compassion for that other soul based on the lesson that they've taught us. And once we do that, it really does resolve so much. Like I could meet any of the people that have done really awful things to me, quote unquote awful, right? And I would give them big hugs now and I'd be like, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Like I know you're probably not feeling the same way I am in this moment, but like thank you for breaking my heart. It was one of the best experiences of my life. Thank you for giving me like the learning that I really have a stronger heart than I thought. Right? So I think that if as we heal, we can start to do more from a place of that like joy and compassion and grace piece, because we're going to always think that we have more on this journey, we have more to learn, we have more to heal, but we reach a point where it's like, no, I am a healed individual and I'm in an earth experience and other stuff is going to come up, but I get to do things now from a place of joy. And so I've been doing a lot of work on that because I feel like the only way we manifest our greatness in the world is we've got to come from a place of joy. But getting to a place of joy is very, very hard if you don't have the right neurochemistry.
Why do you use the word hire when you talk about that?
Hire? Why do I? Because
Do you feel like there's an
in
exchange?
my mind, I feel like there's an exchange. Like I hired them to teach me something, and I took something away from the exchange, and they're taking
Why not
something
asked?
I like to say hired because it helps sometimes in the business setting, because when you are running a business and you hire someone, there's always some transactional exchange there. And I wish the exchange wouldn't be as transactional. I wish people would look at that and be like, this is actually loving, caring, give-take between the two of us. It's a fair exchange in some way.
Well, I was going to say, because when you're painting this picture, the little souls, and it's probably because of that movie, but the little souls look like little water droplets with little water.
Oh yeah,
droplet
those
legs
little
on it.
guys from. I
think it's called Soul Man.
Is
or
it
Soul
something?
something,
Okay.
right? Soul.
I've seen the previews for it.
Yeah. Well, because the boys have had to watch it. You have children.
I probably haven't watched it with them.
No, it's a good movie.
Okay.
We'll
Now I'm
figure
gonna
out
watch
what it
it.
is.
Okay.
We'll figure out what it is. But the reason, so I'm picturing this as you're describing it, and in my brain, these little water droplets are asking each other, "Can you teach me? Can you teach me how to do this?" Because that's the way you started to describe
Or
it.
can you show me the exact opposite of who I want to be?
Yeah, but you described it that way. As
Yeah.
you said, "Can you teach me?" Then you said, "Higher." And so, in my brain, I look at it as like, because what I also have come to believe is that I really wanted to like, when I first started thinking about healing my inner child, that's become a primary focus for so many people.
Huge, huge.
But here's the thing that I've discovered is that my inner child is one piece of my trauma. My teen self is one piece of my trauma.
Correct.
My 20s, my 30s, there's trauma all over.
There's trauma all over, so we have to go back and heal every moment with each one of those versions.
So there's a bunch of me around that I have to talk with and exchange ideas with, and go back and hold hands with and walk through things. But when I think about the individuals that have impacted me in those moments, good or bad, I think of it like two little kids asking each other to go, let's go play.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out. Let's go learn about this. And so when you say higher, I don't know, but it invokes like this imagery of asking someone to do this with you.
Oh yeah, that's why team is the most important thing. Like all of our success in life, I believe, comes from learning how to team better.
Yeah. It's like the Little Rascals or something, right? Like, I don't want to go in this haunted mansion by myself.
No, nobody wants to go to the earth plane by themselves, right? We all
Yeah.
want to go in and we want to know we've got this family of souls that's here to help support us to learn and grow.
But isn't it also important not to like contradict our own point that we're proving through this conversation? But there has to be some importance, I should say, of learning to be comfortable alone. Right?
That is very true, right? Because we always are looking for somebody else to complete us, or somebody else to fill the void, or somebody else to validate us.
Or fix us.
Or fix us. I mean, that was the hardest part for me when I went through the divorce that I went through was, you know, the kids aren't here, I'm by myself in a house, what do I do with myself? And I realized, I'm like, I have no idea what to do. I'm like, should I clean the whole house? I'm like, well, I'll try that, clean the whole house. Do I feel better? No. Okay, what do I do next? Mm-hmm. So I tried all these different things, and finally I realized, I'm like, what if I just lied here and just talked to myself and just enjoyed that experience, right? And so I started doing a lot of that. Like, I would talk to myself. I'd be like, oh, I'm talking to my higher self today. Oh, I'm talking to like this version of myself from when I was 10 that had an issue. And it was so funny because I got so comfortable and happy with like all these different varietals of who I was that now when I'm around other people and they're like, oh, I really miss you. I want to hang out with you. I love your energy. I'm like, yeah, I love my energy too. I'm like, I'm really excited to hang out with myself tonight. They're like, why aren't you going to come out with us? I'm like, no, I want to hang out by myself because I love how I feel when I'm by myself and I'm alone. And that was a massive shift for me because I never thought I would get there. Never thought I would.
I like being alone as a recharge. And I've come to a place of comfort with it over several years. But one of the things I used to do that was odd, because I've not identified it until recently, is like I had a real trouble with boundaries.
Okay.
I couldn't set boundaries because that didn't coincide with my anxious attachment style that I had, right?
Yep.
Because if I'm telling you what triggers me and what I need, then I'm giving you ammunition to hurt me in my brain. This is the way I thought of it, right?
Yeah.
Not in my heart, but in my brain. And so the realization of like how healthy those boundaries are and the ability to say, no, I don't have anything going on tonight. And I really love spending time with you. But I have to choose myself this evening. I can't wait to see you next time. Whether that's in business or otherwise. I've always been a consummate yes man.
Okay.
And the problem with that is twofold. One,
Exhausting
because your calendar piles up though too, right? If I say yes to 7 people and 3 of those things are on the same day, somebody's going to be let down.
Right.
Whether they don't get me at all because I'm busy, or they don't get the best version of me because I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And what I've realized and still work on, because I if a good friend's like, hey, can you help me like move something? And I'm like, okay, right? Like I'm hard, but I've gotten better. Hey, this Saturday I can't work because I've got a Thursday, a Friday, and a whatever event, and a Sunday event. So I got to have Saturday to me. But it used to just be an incapacity. I had no capacity.
You had no capacity for yourself.
To create boundaries for myself because there was a fear of the affirmations going away that I needed.
Oh, yeah.
There was no self-love. So every little piece of affirmation.
Like, I need it.
Yeah, but it's like eating Chinese food. I'm hungry an hour again later.
Yeah.
Right? And so like it didn't make much sense for me to fill my body with sodium and deplete my energy, but rather find sustenance. And so I've learned over time that quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And the only way to really achieve that is to have boundaries.
See, I always had an issue with boundaries too, and what I started doing is if anybody would ask me to do anything, I'd be like, I would love to do this, because normally that's the desire, right? I would love to be a part of this with you. However, I know that I tend to overcommit. So I'm going to take 24 hours, I'm going to think about it, and then I'll come back. And then in my think about it phase, I'm like, okay, if I say yes to this, how's this going to impact me emotionally? If I say yes to this, how's it going to impact me intellectually? If I say yes to this, how's this going to impact me physically, spiritually? And then finally I'm like, is there anything else I would rather do with my time? And that last question was the one that really hit me hard, because I'm like, there are a ton of other things I want to do with my time. Why would I say yes to this if there are so many other things that I want to do with my time that I haven't done yet?
Is there anything else I'd rather do with my time? I think that's a kind of a cool question to start off each morning. I'd like to make a note of that on this episode. Is there anything else I'd rather do with my time? Because what a cool way to start the morning. Because sometimes as adults, we forget we can go buy a whole cheesecake and then eat it.
Correct. And cheesecake is delicious.
It's my favorite dessert.
With raspberry. Do you put raspberries on top or any type of fruit, or are you like pure cheesecake?
I mean, it depends on the mood. I enjoy fruit. I'm not a chocolate guy.
Okay.
I know
Cheesecake is my favorite too.
But if I do have something on top, the preference is a berry compote.
Yes,
Of some
berry
kind,
compote, that's
right?
Okay.
Right, like simmer that down,
Very
pour it on the
smart.
top. I like a good butterscotch.
Oh.
Butterscotch is probably my favorite artificial flavor.
Okay.
Or one that can be created. I know it's very cardigan of me, but I tend to be an old soul, so
Okay.
I'm a sucker for butterscotch. Butterscotch pudding, butterscotch cheesecake.
We have
Butter
to find
pecan
a
ice cream.
butterscotch cheesecake.
It's-
I think that would change your life.
I made a with that same corporate job. They had a cupcake cook-off, and I always love to challenge myself with art or with cooking. This one, not that one.
Okay.
And I won first and third place in a cupcake cook-off. My first place cupcake was a butterscotch rum cheesecake cupcake.
What?
Many
sounds
people felt as if
amazing.
I was cheating because I was really just creating little cheesecakes. They were like, "This isn't really a cupcake." I'm like, "It is. It's in
It's
in one of those little
delicious.
peel things."
Do you
Like,
still
what
have the
makes it a
recipe
cupcake?
for this?
The thing about me is, I don't really have recipes for anything,
What?
but I build by memory. But I could cook you the same dish 2 years apart and it may taste different.
Okay.
I have started writing some things down. I would love to say honestly that I have all these recipes, and in actuality I don't. I have like 4 or 5. And my grandmother,
You're like a creative soul, though. You just like creatively create things all the time.
it does feed my soul for sure to create. My grandmother and I certainly not argue, but we used to have. She would say, with baking, you have to follow the rules. It's very much calculated. You can't skew from the rules. And I would say, watch me, right?
Sounds like you.
Yeah, and so I always used to like to challenge that in a fun-loving way, but like using. So one of the things I like to do if I'm making a dessert of any kind, where it calls for certain things, I'll add pudding, like the powder,
Yeah.
to make creaminess, and
Okay.
like that's become a thing now. I've seen that in other recipes. But back in the day when I was making these cupcakes,
Nobody was using pudding.
nobody was using
Come
pudding
on.
I knew of. It was probably, I'm sure they were.
Maybe
It's
on
kinda
the
like,
Food Channel.
yeah, it's
Who
like kind of
knows?
like one of those things where I'm like, certainly no one's thought of a tiny piece of paper with a sticky backside that I can leave somewhere, right? So like, I'm thinking I'm coming up with a new Post-it, but I wasn't. But no, I like to challenge. I like to challenge the rules in creative spaces because I think that's what creativity is about. And the reason I mentioned that, or like by doing a painting, is because I've had people ask me like, what don't you do? Or wow, how do you get the courage to just do all these things? And I'm like, because I don't have, in my creative space, I don't, wow, whoa, cool, breakthrough. In my creative space, I don't have an expectation of greatness,
Thank God.
right?
Can we get rid of that expectation of greatness so you can just be who you are?
Yeah, because like I'm not concerned about
Lot
what
less
that painting
pressure.
turns out like. I'm not concerned if these 3 people like
Because
it.
you're not attached to the outcome.
Right. I'm just getting the colors onto the canvas is the way I look at it.
Ooh, that's a very helpful process for you.
And the
moving
same thing for
forward.
cooking.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily looking. Now I'm looking for people to enjoy the food, but that's a big part of why I love to cook because I love to watch people enjoy something I've created. But I don't have an expectation. Like I don't need the table that I'm feeding
Right.
to tell me this is better than I've ever had.
No, you just
This is
want
the
them to have
best
the experience.
salad. I just want them to enjoy something I've created for them.
So why can't you take that exact concept into relationship and intimacy?
In what way? What would that look like? How do you mean?
I'm asking you.
Well, maybe that's why, because I don't know what that looks like. Because of fear. Oh, in that sense. Okay, so because of a constant fear of failure, like a fear of, in my eyes, I've never been married. So I have yet to complete a relationship at 41 years old.
But remember, we talked about, right? Marriage is not necessarily the end goal.
Correct. And that's the first time I really comprehended that concept, by the way.
Really? Oh, cool.
Yeah.
But what I'm
talked
saying
about
to you
it
is
with
you like doing this creative stuff that where you don't have to prove greatness, right? So cooking and art, right? So the same principles that you use when you're cooking or when you're doing art, I want you to take that exact same structure, and I'll walk it through for you on like what the things are that are similar, and apply that formula then to intimacy and relationships. It'll be the game-changing tool for you.
I can tell you where it stems from.
Yeah, which is good to know, but I don't care as much as to where it comes from. I care that we have an action plan to move you forward.
Sure.
Right? So like I would tell you, like, this is off the cuff, so it's probably not perfect, but like I would say, okay, you need to look at relationships like there's no end state you're going after. There's no end state of greatness. You get to enjoy the process of it and be as creative as you want without trying to prove anything. Right? You get to watch the person in the experience and watch their enjoyment of it. So you can create the enjoyment and you can watch the enjoyment, but it's not on you to do anything more than that. I'd have to like have you walk through with me how you do art and what you feel about art when you do it, because then I would just extrapolate that, because we find these two things where you're totally in your zone. You're like this beautiful expression, you're in innovation, your art, your cooking, those two ways of being for you. We have to take that formula down and allow you to experience that in relationship and intimacy. You can see how like you're really good in those two zones. You don't overthink it. You don't try to be anything you're not. You just are.
Yeah.
And we want to take that feeling into the intimacy.
And I live that way sometimes now. I
Yeah.
don't know that I would have ever been comfortable or confident saying that I lived that way at all ever prior to the last 2 years. I have long periods of time where I lived that comfortability without the need to prove.
Right.
Nowadays.
Which is so good.
Never had that. One of the things that I like that you just now said is that because I have a tendency, again, to overthink, overdo things, right? Which I'm sure you've noticed. And I've certainly worked on that. But I said I can identify why, and you said I don't care about that as much as what's the action plan moving forward.
Yeah.
And I think that is a hang-up that I have.
That's a hang up of a lot of people that are in the healing environment, because they're like, well, if I
I
understand
want
the
to
why,
focus why, right?
then I can change it. But focusing on the why is focusing on the past.
Sure.
And it's keeping you stuck in the
Exactly.
old version of you.
That makes so much sense.
And we don't
I don't
want
say
you to
exactly
focus.
because I know. I say exactly because I'm agreeing.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to clarify that, because sometimes I get bothered by my sons, which I'm sure all of us as parents do, when you're like telling them you're teaching them something, or they'll ask you a question. They're like, hey, how do you do this? And I'll be like, such and such, and they'll be like, oh, I know. I'm like, you don't, because you just asked me, right? So like, I didn't know that before you said that, but that makes a lot of sense, because I've spent so much time in my healing journey wasted on trying to backtrack and figure out the why,
Right.
instead of staying focused on the now and the how do I not again.
Well, that's how you know you're in a trauma pattern around anything. It's when you put yourself into the past out of fear of it happening again, or fear of what happens if this is who I am, or you push yourself into the future, fear of the future, what if I never have this thing?
Yeah.
And so it's again, this big muscle, and it's easier to do with more serotonin, more oxytocin, right? Because then you're feeling really good, and you're like, oh, this is so easy. I just stay in the moment, I focus on the person like crazy.
Sure.
Right? Makes life easier.
I think I'm kind of stuck in a healing loop at the moment, because
Yes,
when you
you
talk
are.
when you
Yeah.
talk about like let's focus on the moment, or like let's not worry about this part of that healing journey. I have a vast awareness,
You
But
have
I-
a vast awareness.
but I use that awareness to almost like continuously relive moments to try and figure out how not to repeat them,
Correct.
instead of
Deciding.
accepting
Yep.
and saying, now one thing I have gotten past is the understanding of like not, I say like being self-aware is different than being self-aware with action. So one of the things I have moved past is not blaming my traumas, but instead like taking in the lesson from criticism. So rather than being like, well, I am who I am, and if you knew what I went through, but rather saying, thank you for sharing that perspective with me. I will make sure that I have that on my brain next time we have this conversation. Or now that I understand how that action has made you feel, I own that action, I apologize for that action, and I take action rather than words to ensure that we don't relive that same lesson.
Correct.
Right? Like in our interaction doesn't have to be continually looped in some kind of toxic performance
Right.
of, yeah, but as a kid, because I'm not a kid anymore, right? And a lot of people do that. A lot of people get inside that
Yeah, they
that
do.
child trauma,
Especially
and then they
in
live
the
there.
healing journey.
Yeah.
But I had to have a coach tell me once, she was like, Annie, you know enough about how you engage. You know enough about how you interact. You know enough about what triggers you. She's like, we don't have to revamp it and look at it again. She's like, all you got to do is be like, oh, check, great, the universe is giving me another opportunity.
Yeah, that's cool too, because like that's where you get those quicker reps, right? That's
Correct.
where you turn 10-minute abs into.
Correct. 7
Into
minute
7
abs or
abs.
6 minute abs. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally accurate.
Yeah, because I've noticed my my recovery time, so to speak, has been lesser from
Right.
things that trigger me.
Which is really what you want. You just want a lesser or quicker recovery time.
Yeah.
So that's why if you see stuff coming at you and you're like, ooh, this feels similar to how it was before, you're like, oh, great, thanks, universe, thanks, inner child, I'm so glad we did this together, feeling really good about it. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah,
Because if we stay in that loop and we spend too much time thinking it through, we're actually putting ourselves into the past and we're attaching a lot of meaning to that emotion that just came up that we don't have to attach anymore because we've already done the work.
That's cool because you said loop twice. I've heard that. But the thought process that I spoke about earlier about life is the river, rivers don't have loops.
There are no loops in a river.
Yeah.
No.
I'm not, if I'm down in Memphis, I'm not going back to St. Louis before I get down to
Correct.
whatever else is on Mississippi, before Louisiana.
But there are a lot of like places you can get off and get distracted on the river, right?
Sure.
And so
I think that's okay sometimes.
it's totally okay to get off and get distracted. I think the issue that I find for a lot of people in the healing journey is they get stuck because their neurochemistry isn't as healthy as it could be. And healthy neurochemistry is the boost that everyone needs to get you to a totally different place.
Okay.
So you're like, it hurts my heart to watch people go through their health journey and literally it's like they're climbing, but it's very, very slow. If you boost your neurochemistry, then all of a sudden like a story, like for example, say you get triggered by something, right? Normally, you get triggered by it, you'd be thinking, okay, this goes back to this is why I would do this, okay, I need to not do that anymore, I have to do it differently, this is how I'm going to do this, instead of just being like, got it, okay, on. Right? Like we're spending too much time in the past and trying to understand it instead of saying, yeah, look, it's happening again. Great. Yay, it's happening again. The universe wants me to solve this. The universe wants me to move on. Great. 2 paths. Which path am I going down? The old path, the new path, the new path. This is where I'm going. We got to make it more fun and more lively and more interactive instead of so introspective and logical all the time because our subconscious or our unconscious brain works at like the speed of light sometimes. We don't need it to go slow to reset it. You know, so that's just like a little piece of this process that I wish more people knew.
When I was in school, I would oftentimes get points subtracted off my math work
Okay.
because I would write down the problem and I wouldn't write
Oh, the work of it?
how I got to that problem.
Okay. Or the answer. You'd write down the answer.
I'd write down the answer without showing my work, showing my work. So I'd get a lot of points off continuously.
Okay.
I did the work in my brain, but I couldn't figure out, maybe it was an ADD thing, maybe it was just a spectrum thing, who knows. But I could figure out, but it's just like there and there. I was in my 30s before I really clicked about they are, and that's the difference,
Yep.
right? And
That's no big deal.
I would consider myself, I can confidently say, not egotistically say, that I'm a very intelligent person overall.
True.
But there's a lot of things that I count out my months, right? Like there's a lot of things that just don't.
I still do my multiplication tables on my fingers sometimes.
Yeah, they don't register in my brain. And so when you're talking about this, that's a simplistic way to think about that for me is always the best way. But that is very much how I've operated this journey up until now. Is I should say the opposite of how I operate this journey, because I show all of my work. I'm so focused on the order of operation
Correct. Yep. But that's part of the trauma pattern.
instead of just the solution.
Yeah.
Whereas if I treated it the same way as I treat math, like you're saying, and just say, well, I know it's 4. I don't have to break this down. It's 4. The answer's 4.
But this is what everybody does in their brain because, like you said about the math example, we used to do it where we just put the number down and we got there was a cost to putting that number down without doing all the work. So then in our trauma healing journey, we're like, well, now we have to do all the work. So we're going to do all the work, and then we'll eventually put the answer down. We're doing that because we're in the trauma pattern from what we learned not to do because we were harmed because we did that thing. So what I tell everybody is it's not about doing either extreme, it's about finding the middle ground. So in the math example, can you do a little bit of work and be like, oh, I know where I'm going, great, I know the answer now.
Yeah.
Right, so we're shortcutting it. It's like this constant idea in the head of how do we shortcut the healing journey, not so that we lose the power of it, but so that we don't have to stay stuck as often in doing all of that work, because your brain doesn't need it. Your brain knows faster than you can even reflect all of that work and what it looks like.
Oh, yeah. Mine Rolodexes things instantaneously.
Right.
I recognize body language from all the other times I've seen body language.
You don't have to walk through, well, now she's turning her shoulder a certain way, which means she's turning away from me, which means this. You're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm asking you to do the same thing when you get into those triggered states.
Yeah, instead of analyzing it for so long.
Correct. Yeah, you
Because
don't
that's
have
where the
to.
delay comes from.
That's where the delay comes
That
from.
and the inability prior to have that pause.
And the self-beat up to be like, oh, I'm still really healing. I've got a lot more work to
Yeah.
do, and there's a lot that I have to fix. No.
Don't worry about that because
Don't
that's
worry
not
about it
this.
at all. No. Everybody
Whatever
is...
this particular moment
Correct.
is doesn't have to do with all the other work you have to do.
No.
It just has to do with this problem.
Correct.
Right?
This moment.
There's 50 problems on my math sheet.
Correct.
I don't
I
look
want you
at,
to stay in the problem that
I
you're
don't
in.
look at 24
No.
before I'm done with 12.
No. You look at only 12. And when you finish 12, you're like,
That's cool.
yes, I'm amazing. Moving
Yeah.
on. And we have to celebrate it. You have to celebrate it every time.
That's badass. Well, thank you for walking through that with
Of
me.
course.
One of the things I like to do is as I wind down the show, I like to share something that I'm taking away from our conversation,
Cool.
so that you know that there was comprehension and growth within the conversation. So what I'm taking away from today is how dangerous the loop can be. How overanalyzing a moment of growth can keep you stuck in the moment where you're not growing.
Correct.
That's pretty powerful for me as an individual. I'm sure there's many people that can identify with that, but for me in particular, it's very powerful because as an individual whose primary all-encompassing issue was overthinking everything, that's pretty profound. So that's what I'm taking away from today. And then the last thing I like to do is I like to ask you,
Sure.
what is a phrase, a mantra, or a saying that has kept you going or keeps you going when you feel like you're faltering mentally?
Well, I use the same phrase every time I go into a place where I'm getting dark, because I still have those moments, right?
Yeah, we're all always going to.
And it's so funny because when you ask me that, I'm like, I know the phrase, and then it almost like it disappears in the moment. But let me see if I can bring it back in. Well, when I was a little girl, I used to have this one phrase that I would say, which is different from the main phrase, but they're all linked. So the one when I was a little girl was, God is good, he means all good for me.
Okay.
I would say that over and over again. As I got older, that wasn't as powerful because I used it so much. And so instead I started saying, be still and know. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. So I ramp it up and then I ramp it down. And when I get really caught in my own head, I have to walk through that be. Be still. Be still and know. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I am God. Because I have to remind myself that I am and I'm okay to be. And then I am also a part of God. And then I also go back to I am. And if I am, then I can figure this out.
And that cadence probably has an effect
Slows
on
you
breath.
down. Yep, slows you
Right.
down, slows down your heart rate.
Right on. Annie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad that I got to be here. And thank you
Yes.
for all that you do for people to get their voice out in this world and to help people identify, what's going on in their lives. Because I can see you. You're always trying to make people's lives better. I think now what we need to do is get some cheesecake with berry compote.
Yeah, I've got like A couple more things to do today. Let's go find that cheesecake.
Cheesecake.
All right. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time here on Mental.
This episode of Mental is brought to you by Spas and More. Visit spasandmorestl.com for more information.
TRT treatment is something that's widely thought of as something that just gives you an edge. That extra beast mode in the gym, a little bit of push when it's needed, or just that testosterone feeling, right? But in actuality, TRT treatment goes way deeper than that. It helps keep you calm. It helps keep you patient. It regulates your mood by regulating your hormones. It's not just a treatment to go beast mode. It's a treatment to be a calmer and better father. As a business owner and a father myself, I understand all too well how much it's needed to become a little more patient and a little more calm in a world that's pretty chaotic. Go check out Prime Performance today.